Hi.
Hi.
Oh, Terry, it's good to see you. I'm sorry you've
See you.
been struggling a bit, but you look great. And
Thank you. Yeah,
sounds like
coming along.
with
Yeah.
therapy starting tomorrow, that'll be terrific. Good for you.
Good.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Um, in my conversation with my son, I mean, I just wanted to tell you, I was just so thrilled to hear everything he had to say. I mean, because we don't talk about it.
uh,
Because I told him because he started in patrol, and then they moved him to homicide. And so I don't,
Yeah.
I don't want to hear
right.
it's bad enough that people are going. I thought
Right.
I turned that on. But anyway, so he said his first thing is the training. He said they need to up the salary, first of all, and the age that they train police officers. I mean, people to be police officers. They need to lengthen the training, and they need to train in cultural diversity, ethnic sensitivity, and understanding all cultures. Because, different cultures have different ways of doing things, and they need to understand what that is. They also the curriculum should be evaluated, and they should have college training. Um, and like he said, change the age requirement. He said because sometimes in dealing with when he was supervisor over the patrol division, they were doing things unnecessarily, stopping people unnecessarily, for minor little things that if you just if you're going to stop them, give them some education on what they were doing so that it would help them understand. Because if people don't take defensive driving, which gives you a lot of understanding about driving and the road laws and whatnot, people tend to not sometimes be aware after they get their licenses. But he said that's one thing they were doing, stopping people for some needless things that he didn't think they should have been stopped for. So I said, well, Andy, if that was in their training, then that's what they did. He said, but you're supposed to use your mind, use your brain.
Common sense.
Yeah, and common sense. Um, so that was the main area. And he said they need to spend more money on training, because his main thing is people need to be trained correctly. And I know in all the shootings and whatnot, officers have done what they wanted to do. I mean, it's a certain, like putting the knee on the neck or on the body and stuff. And then they're supposed to turn them over for recovery after they've been there for a while. He said they're not doing that. They're using their own, whatever prejudices they have, they are going with that. Because, people have preconceived ideas, he said, of especially people of color and immigrants. Um, they don't understand anything. Um, well, people of color are not, or animals and stuff like that. He said, but you have to, that's where all that sensitivity training would come in. Um, and he said they go beyond what they were trained to do. And then sometimes they don't always follow every step that you should follow, because they get emotional, because they get upset that you didn't stop when they first told you to stop. He said it's a lot going on. That's why he retired. One reason why he retired as captain. in City of Wilmington's police department. And he said he didn't like some of the things that were going on. So he decided he didn't want to become a part of it anymore, because he said, I know if I said something, I might have been signaled as watch him. You know what I'm saying? And they would be checking everything that he does, which he said it wouldn't have been a problem with what they would find, because he followed the letter of the law. But, you know, it might make somebody vengeful about what he's saying and what they want to do and what they don't want to do. And then with everybody talking about, he said, defunding the police is not really the way to go, but it's retrain them. And he said also they need to keep police officers' records. He said they should be publicized. He said because so many police officers have charges against them for different infractions, and if the public knows about some of these things, I don't always agree, because it could become prejudicial. But he said this is what he thinks they should be. And they should engage in the community more, because Wilmington used to have a police community relations unit, a whole unit that focused on community relations, because I worked with them when I worked for the city of Wilmington in dispersing information, because complaints came to me, not necessarily about the police, but about different situations in the city. And sometimes you have to contact the police department, you know, to make them aware. But he said they need to go to civic association meetings, and they need to stay in communities, even patrolling on bikes. Of course, today that might be a little dangerous, because so many people have guns in these communities.
Yeah.
And the police would not have the physical vehicle for protection, you know, if things got out of hand. But he said they need to be more police community relations. He was talking about also the use, well, like I told you, he said the use of force is sometimes unfounded or unsubstantiated when people make a complaint. He said they will hold those records for 6 years and then they're destroyed. He said they should hold them until maybe that person is off the force, you know, if they retire or something, because then they don't have anything to fall back on when they get a complaint against a police officer again, that same officer. And he said he thinks they should hold records longer. As he said, there were 395 uses of force, and only 25% of the police officers that were charged suffered disciplinary action. So out of 395 complaints, only a small number of police officers were actually disciplined for those infractions, which says a lot, that it's probably my who you know, or who you know in the force and whatnot, and how your family is affected with them and what have you. But he said, one thing, the police do not recognize their own flaws. And that needs to be corrected. And he said they should not take attitudes against people that they are stopping, which would go back to the sensitivity training, because you're there to do a job, he said, and do it well without injury or harm to the person by the police, unless it's absolutely necessary. Let me see. And that's basically, I didn't talk to him about George Floyd's situation.
Yeah, that was my confusion.
I know,
Yeah.
Because it just didn't, I was just trying to get his view on, what you
Sure.
had asked me, how he felt about, the
Sure.
police force and whatnot. But now he's still in security. He works now at Del Tech, in their security department. So, but that's basically what he said. The main thing is raise the age, because some people are immature, and that's the main thing. And education, up the education and the training time,
Right.
and raise their salary, because it might bring other types of people responsible in the game.
We
So that's
watched, we watched Good Morning America, and this morning, and they had it all about the police. And they went around to Japan and to other countries, to London and other countries, talking about their police force. And so many of them in other countries had 2 and 3 years of training before. And like your grandson.
My son. He's my son.
Your son, yeah, that would make sense. Sorry. Your son said, our police training is like months, like 6 months or to a year or something like that. And from what I heard, he has it right that they really need more maturity and more training.
Yeah. Because he said that's what he would do if he was in charge.
Well, there was a man who is now in his early 70s and retired, but he spent many years and spent all of his life in police work. And I think he began in New York City. And the training for him was like, he talked about weeks. I think it was not more than 3 months.
No, I think that's here too.
Yeah, and he didn't give his age, but the impression I had was that he started young, like right out of high school.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
18, 19, 20, in that age range when he began. And then he moved up quickly because he had a lot of good common sense. He was responsible. He did what he was supposed to do. And he also recommends what your son said. He recommends much better training and much broader, the very things your son talked about, understanding cultures, understanding people and cultures and backgrounds. Yeah.
Also, this program showed something very interesting. I think I agree with you that defunding the police is not going to be helpful.
No.
However, I forget where it was. Oh, I think it was San Francisco,
Right.
where they rearranged their budget so that they could afford to train those in the behavioral sciences. And they showed a man, and this is for the people who have mental health issues.
Yes.
And they showed a man who was street, homeless man on the street, and acting in a bizarre way. And these people who are trained in the behavioral sciences came without a gun and in more civilian type clothing and they came 2 or 3. They were not just one person. And they talked with him and they were able to manage his situation. Later on, this man was put together a little bit, and he was interviewed, and he said, if the police had come, I would have been looking around and worried if they had a gun, what was going to happen. And of course, that would have heightened his issues.
Yes.
Yes.
So And I guess it's like 20 or 30% of those calls that the police get are for people with mental health issues.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's a way to defund, rearrange.
Yeah, and that's what the whole purpose
training.
is, rearrange your funding
Yeah,
so that it helps the people that you are supposed to protect,
yes.
Right.
you know.
I think
Because-
that phrase, defund the police, was, they needed a marketing person to advise them before they come up.
Oh,
with
Oh,
it.
they sure did.
I
They
mean,
sure
that
did.
was-
That
That
was
was just
bad
because at
strategy.
some level, it really was take money away from the law enforcement officers per se and provide resources that could better deal with mental health issues or whatever. And I've seen people using the phrase reimagine policing.
That's
Mhm.
a good one.
Think
Yeah.
And
about
that-
it in a different
Yes.
way, do you
Yes.
know?
Yeah,
And
because you have a lot of statistics that you could go on for this particular police infraction, you know, or why they pulled out their guns for that you could study and then come up with a better plan
Yeah.
Sure,
Exactly.
for reimagining the police department.
sure.
Yeah.
You know, because we do need that kind of protection. Because people out here today are being hurt by people it's so god awful. It's
It is
awful.
Yeah.
Well, and the
good.
number of
It's awful.
guns is just aggravates the whole situation.
Yeah.
That's more dangerous for the
Yes.
police. It's more dangerous. I mean, I just read a thing before we came on, like 3 more people shot at killed at a graduation party
Graduation.
Really?
Come
in
on.
Miami. You know,
Miami,
it's a
yeah.
graduation party. Terry and Lyle, you were at 3 graduation events. Imagine if
Right.
people were wounded and 3 people killed at a graduation
Mhm.
party. It's mind-boggling.
It is.
It's mindless
And you,
It is
because
that.
it's people wanting control
True.
yeah.
that they aren't supposed to have,
Yeah.
and they don't have a sense of self. Because I think if people knew exactly who they were, because I tell my son this, my oldest son, because I have a grandson that was always in trouble for some reason, and he was rebelling. And they would come and talk to me, Mom, what can we do about so-and-so? I said, well, you know, first thing, y'all never let him be, or you never tried to find out who he was and what he was interested in, even from a little person. He has an older brother and a younger brother. And the older brother, he just wanted to excel in everything, you know, sports and academics and stuff. So that was their focus.
Mhm.
So when the other son came along, second child,
The middle child.
the middle child syndrome, and it's
Yeah.
the truth because I have a daughter that has that syndrome. I told her, I said, you have that. But anyway, so they didn't ask him what you like. They just threw him in, you know. So when the third son came some years later, he was 7, and they asked him, do you want to play football? He said, no, I don't want to do that. I said, and you didn't make him. I said, but you didn't give the other son, you didn't give him that opportunity. He just was in the shadow of his older brother. So I said, you all got to help him because he needs to know who he is and his worth, not only for himself, but in his family. You know, I said, so you asked me, and that's why I told you. I didn't say nothing before. I was dropping little hints, but you have to let people, your children,
That's
find
hard
out.
as a grandmother to not drop in.
I know.
I
Because then
I
he
know
gets
about
mad
that.
with me. He gets mad with me and doesn't speak to me for a while. I said, okay, fine.
Yeah, you'll come
I-
around. You'll
I
come
still love
around.
Yeah.
Well, you
know,
know, we were talking about guns for a minute. I don't know if you saw the recent opinion in California.
The judge said,
California has had a ban on AR-15 since 1989.
Yeah.
Right.
and this judge overturned it.
And he likened it to a Swiss Army knife. Like, you know, and besides, there aren't that many of them anyway. So why is it, I mean, people
Well,
are,
where's he? Is he living in a vacuum?
Well,
Because that's all that's out there.
I don't know.
AK-47s. Look at the two young people that were shooting at the police, broke in somebody's house, ran away from the home they were in,
Yeah.
broke into the people's house, found the guns, and was shooting at the officers
Mhm.
because somebody heard glass breaking at that house and knew the people weren't there.
right.
And the boy walks out with an AK-47. Come on, where's he been?
Right.
There's too many guns on the street. There's too
Oh, it
many.
is
Quick
out
access
of
to
control,
guns.
out of
It's
control.
out of control. And that's another thing that needs to be, well,
tough
people are
one.
trying to take that issue.
Tough one. It's a tough one.
It
Well,
is.
Delaware has a couple of bills in
Okay.
front of the legislature right now.
Mhm.
And so it's important that we're calling legislators in support of those. They're very minor. I mean, they're very basic. They're not
Mhm.
minor, they're basic.
Basic.
And they
Okay.
ought to be the law. And so we were told that what we needed to do was contact the chair of the Appropriations Committee, because when there are these bills, there has to be some financial plan to implement them. So they go through the Appropriations Committee so that they can designate funding to make
For
the
the
program work. So right now,
Okay.
those bills are in the Appropriations Committee. And
Okay.
it's important to notify the chair. If you don't know who that is, I can send it to you, but just
Yeah.
send an
Okay.
email or call the chair of the Appropriations Committee and urge them to
Yeah.
move that on.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, do that.
We're talking
And I'll
about,
probably get my daughters and them, to also call, because it's important. The more people that are involved,
Oh, yeah.
and I tell them this all the time, they used to publish all kinds of things coming from the legislature, the state legislature in the paper. I don't get a paper anymore, so I don't know if they do that. But to read up on the bills that people are presenting,
Yep.
because I tell them that's in your favor. I mean, if you read them and you don't like them, then you can talk to that legislator to find out the reason why. And because you voted for that person, or you vote, you may not have voted for them, but you vote, you have a right. They should tell you. I said, because you have grandkids and stuff coming up now, and I got great grandkids coming up, and it's important for their quality of life not to be affected by all that is going on today in a negative way, but hopefully in a positive way, because this is awful.
Well, going back to the things that your son suggested about the police, particularly, more mature people, the hires designed to attract potential police officers who will be equipped to do a better job.
Yeah.
One of the things that it seems to me, and I don't know if it's done in some police departments, I think there should be a psychological evaluation.
They do.
Do they? Okay. Because clearly there are people who would like nothing better than to have a gun and a badge.
Right in your hand.
Okay.
And
So that's
well
great.
controlled.
That's
But
good
they
to
do
know.
do psychological.
That's good
They
to
do,
know.
because when my son was going through it, my brother-in-law was a police officer. And well, they check first to see if you have anybody who's been in trouble
Sure.
with police, and because that's a no-no, you can't get on the force. You can't, or if anybody's been convicted of any kind of situation, felony, misdemeanor, then they can't get on the force. But somebody, I knew the inspector at the time. He was African American, and I can't remember his name, but he called me at the job. He said, "Ernestine, I just want you to know, your son passed the psychological." Because it's important.
there you go.
I said, well, I tried to raise them to be sane.
There you go. There you go.
But anyway, so, but they do have to have that psychological.
Good. That's good. One of the interesting things that I just saw Ernestine, earlier you mentioned about defensive driving and, to what extent do people know what the rules are?
Yes.
So my husband and I take the defensive driving course every 3 years to get a discount on our insurance. So we got the bill that's due in June, and it had gone way up. And I checked, and sure enough, our defensive driving expired in March. So we need to do it again. So I was doing it yesterday, and there was a section on the test that I just am so sure was never there before.
What's
And
that?
it was a
Because
section on what to do when you're pulled over. And it said, keep your hands on the steering wheel. Or put them out the window. When you're asked for license and do them one at a time. Tell the officer where they're located. Wait until you have permission. I don't think that was ever part of defensive driving before.
It wasn't. But my son had told us that some time ago. That what you because a lot of people I work with, some of them's husbands were police officers, and we would always talk, and they knew each other and everything. But they did say, put your hands on the wheel, so let your hands always be visible,
right? And
wait until he tells you why he pulled you over, or he says license, registration, and proof of insurance,
right.
And let him know, just like you said, let him know where it is, and what. Then you can release one hand. Officer, I'm just going to release this one hand and get in that glove compartment and pull out your information. But that needs to be. They need that. They really do. But see, enough people don't take defensive driving.
Well, and I've been stopped. My stops have all been for going a tad faster than the rules call for. But I know not to get out of the car. I do know that. You wait for the police officers. It feels like it's going to take forever because they're checking your history back till before you were born.
Right.
But while I'm waiting, I'm in the process. I'm getting the registration. I'm getting the insurance card. I'm getting my license because I know that they're going to ask for it. I've always, this has happened more than once. So it's
all right.
This is our secret. I know this is being recorded. Yeah. I'm going to have to destroy the recording.
Because I've been pulled over too. So,
but I've never even thought about it. I mean, obviously, I think about it in the context of all of these awful shootings of unarmed Black men in cars, but it hasn't changed my thinking about what I would do. And so to fix this, and clearly this defensive driving class has been updated since I took it the last time.
That's good.
That's called white privilege, isn't it?
Yeah,
Indeed it is.
Yeah, because you don't even have to think about it. But even me, with my son being a police officer at the time, every time a policeman pulled up behind me, I said, now I know I didn't do what is going on now. Right. And he's just driving behind me. You know what I'm saying? So I do have to be conscious of the speed I'm going when I take off after the light,
I had another white privilege experience Friday night at the Phillies game. It was the first one we'd been to in 2 years. And a friend of mine and I went to a women's day at the Phillies years ago where we met the team and we did batting practice. And I mean, it was great, but they gave us a Phillies bag, a drawstring Phillies bag. And it's great. It's lightweight, it's got drawstrings. So I put my sunglasses and my wallet in there. And when I got to the stadium Friday night, they said no drawstring bags. And I'm like, what? There's nothing in here. No drawstring bag. I still don't know why. But he said no drawstring bags. And I'm like, but the Phillies gave me this bag. Like, you gave it to me. And he said, sorry, you can't take it in. And I'm like, but it's my Phillies bag. Whereupon a man standing off to the side came over with a plastic bag with two handles cut into it. and had me put the drawstring bag in this
Man.
bag. Well, the guy who was doing the screening was not happy about this because you're not supposed to take a drawstring bag into the stadium. But
Mhm.
he let this other guy give me a bag. He winked at me, gave me the bag. And I'm thinking, if I'd been Black, I'm reasonably certain that they would not have
What
given me
happened?
this
Mhm.
plastic bag to
Mhm.
put my drawstring bag in. Do you
Mhm.
know? So once you're aware of those things, they are sort of everywhere. But I'm quite sure a few
Mhm.
years ago, I would have just thought, oh, cool,
Yeah.
have a
Well, you
bag.
know what? I can kind of see that because people carry weapons in all kinds of ways.
That's true.
And it's they're just trying to be safe because they're not searching bags and whatnot. They probably don't have
Well,
metal.
he did open it up. He saw exactly what was, it didn't
What was
matter.
in it.
All it
But
was
then,
a wallet and sunglasses,
yeah,
but
but they said no
no
drawstring bags.
drawstring
And
bags.
sometimes employees, if they know you, they say, "Go ahead, just hide
Yeah.
it." You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And then that could be their job
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That was
But if it had
interesting. It was interesting.
been me, they would not have. He wouldn't have come up. I'd have
Oh,
had to
I think
carry
a
that back
grandmother,
and
I think
forth.
a grandmother would have been okay.
Oh, well,
here.
yeah. Well,
I think
you
a
got to watch
grandmother.
that.
Maybe that was
too.
why they let me through, because I was a grandmother. That could be
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, maybe.
Had nothing to do
But if
with
you
being
were
white. It
younger,
was being a grandmother. Yeah.
yeah, okay. We'll go with that. Because people
I-
tend to say, Grandma. Because white people call me, hey, Grandma. I said, hey, how you doing? I'm not your grandma, but I'm a grandma.
Lyle?
Yeah, I wanted to, I appreciate these comments. I wanted to make one comment about the bills coming to the Delaware legislature.
Okay.
And I think this one is in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and it's the one to change the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights.
Right.
Because when I read what happened, I have already written to a couple of people about that, but now I'll write again because it now has a bill. I think it's Senate Bill 146 or something like that. But it's the Judiciary Committee, and I can't remember offhand who the chair is, but it can be looked up.
Yeah.
And when I read what happened to 3 policemen in the article in the News Journal this week, and again today, there was an article about this Mr. Goodwin, I think his name was.
Mm-hmm.
But there is evidence that the relationship between police and the community need to improve.
Mm-hmm.
And when the mayor of Wilmington cannot, he and the city council have a community policing ordinance that they have passed that they want to implement, and they cannot implement it because the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, which is controlled by the legislature in Dover, will not permit it to take place. So that needs to change. And one of the things your son recommend on accountability issues, making those public, that also is prevented by the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
So those kinds of, those are, to me, very practical, obvious changes that would benefit both police and the community.
Right.
You know, if you had a better relationship with the community, then when the man saw the police come in for domestic disturbance issue, he would have not been, who knows what was going through his head.
Mm-hmm.
And so he shoots at he didn't kill anybody, thank goodness.
Thank God.
Right, thank God for that, because to me, police are still very precious people, especially when they've been around a few years and have some experience. Their training needs to improve, but we do depend on them as a society. And there are all kinds of things they're asked to do, which you have articulated very well, Ernestine, that for which they're not trained. And yet they are the ones who hold it all together. And they're the ones also who at times are making really horrible mistakes. And
Yes.
the prejudice and the bias in the police throughout the nation is really abominable. But
Yeah.
anyway, that right here in Delaware, that item is worth our speaking up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you. I agree with that, Lyle.
Mhm.
And I saw a quote, a comment, I guess, I don't know if it was the head of the FOP, but it was a senior police officer who said that clearly there were things in Leobor that needed to change.
Good.
And I'm like, then why can't we have a conversation about that?
But,
Because
yeah.
it strikes me that there's a group saying it needs to change. This confidentiality needs to change. This, there are aspects of it that need to change. And the police are saying, we're not changing it. We're not changing it. I mean, so how about a conversation? Let's start with, well, what are the things that we agree should change? It's not just this stone wall that says we're not touching it. And I know they think it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Once you change one thing, then it kind of opens it up.
Up the door for something else. But they do have to realize that you are a public servant.
Correct.
You're still a public servant charged with the safety of the public.
Yep.
And if you have so many bills of rights that don't allow this and that and the other, then that's a different job.
Yeah.
That's a different job. Description, period.
Right.
Because it has nothing to do with the people. It's protecting the police department from the wrongs that they may do. Some of them, not everybody is culpable. Everybody's culpable, but not everybody is to blame.
Exactly.
So,
right.
So one of the things I've heard is that they talk about people in society, roles in society where people are armed. And there are, the theory is that there are two. There are warriors, that's the military. That's the army, that's the Marines, and they go to war. And their job is to kill, and to win the battle.
Yeah.
So they are warriors. But police should be viewed as guardians.
Yes.
You use force when you need to, but your role is as a guardian, not as a warrior. And those two get confused.
Yes, they do.
In the minds of a lot of police officers, and they see themselves as warriors against. And they now are being armed with, military gear. I mean, they're being outfitted as warriors. So it reinforces this view that somehow killing is a reasonable thing for me to do in carrying out my job, And so when we talk about the training, it's almost going back to the ground zero. What is the job here? What is the role? It is not to be a warrior. It's not.
That's right.
Not.
But everything around it has said that you are. When they created
me against you, us against
them. And that's not how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be there for me in circumstance, or there to help me diffuse a situation that I can't. So
well, and there are cities and states that have made real progress since George Floyd was murdered.
Yes,
and Delaware hasn't gone anywhere. It shouldn't be that hard for us. We're not a very big state. We're a pretty reasonable state. We've got pretty reasonable legislators. If anybody could make progress, you would think that it would be Delaware.
Yeah, we could hear.
But we're not.
A small state, almost in the union. So come on.
Do you think that when is the end of the legislative session? It's in
June 30th.
The end of the month.
And do you think we'll get some of this through with the budget after appropriations? Do you think we'll make progress after that happens?
I don't know.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Because this legislation was just introduced, the Law Enforcement Accountability Task Force that was called together after 2020 elections. And they met in the fall once and they met a few times. And the last couple of meetings, I listened to them.
Mm.
And that task force, the subgroup that looked at these issues we're talking about today, they recommended changes to the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
But the whole group did not pass it. All right. When it went to the larger group, the whole law for the 19 or 20 members of that group, they did not pass it. So I think the prospects are a little bit bleak.
Mhm.
And as I understand it, Lyle, there were two of the subgroups recommended amending Leobor. And when the first group reported back, the vote was in favor of their recommendation. And Representative Cook, is it, the chair of the task force, voted in favor of that?
Yes.
But they only did 3 of the 4 subcommittee reports the first time.
That's
And when
right.
the fourth group came in a special session, they recommended the changes to Leobor, and that time it didn't pass, and Cook changed his vote from yes to no. So you're right, it's not helpful when the task force doesn't recommend it.
Right.
Fourth subgroup.
Oh, yeah.
The fourth
Yep.
subgroup was the one that had the more impactful responsibility regarding Leobor.
Mm.
And the first group was a little softer in what they
Ah.
recommended, and that,
Okay.
that piece passed.
Okay.
Oh,
But
okay.
then Mr. Cook said, not as it's currently written. All right. So in other words, he was saying, I
Okay.
interpreted his comment to mean, and another member of the task force also was with Cook. Both of these individuals were African Americans, and they said, not as it's currently written, which to me said the kind of the idea of changing Leobor we support. Okay. And but
Right.
not as so I think it has to be, you can interpret that either way. Well, they're stubborn, they don't want to do it, or it has to be refined. It has to be greater clarity, precise.
Yeah.
What is this going to mean? What's the impact?
Mhm.
And so it may be next year before.
Yeah, and see, that's the problem with it, because if it doesn't
Hang on.
happen in June, we're talking about next year. Now, Tizzy Lockman and someone else did introduce a bill to amend Leobor. Was that written along the lines of that stronger recommendation, Lyle?
Yes, it was written along the lines of the subgroup, right? The Law Enforcement Accountability Task Force had these 4 smaller groups.
Right.
And the one assigned to this had, in the judgment of the one of the man who was reporting out for that committee, said, we researched this and talked very positively about all they had done, and then it didn't make it through the larger committee. And they said that small group's work is what Lockman and others used to develop their recommendations for change to Leobor.
Okay. So we should be supporting that to make our voices heard, regardless of whether or not there are enough voices for this time, and regardless of that's the way that it goes through.
So that's just my hunch.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
I'd be happy to be wrong. I'd love to be wrong about that.
Yeah,
I would
me
like
too.
to see it change it.
But if the chairperson is not going to be for it unless there changes, and the
Makes it
time
harder.
is running out to change, it probably won't happen till next year then.
Yeah.
That's
Well, we'll keep trying, but
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And also on the program, on a little lighter note, on the program this morning, they had one slide that they put on. The first police department was developed in Egypt in 3000 BC.
Oh, my.
And the first one in the UK was in 1066.
Aha.
And the first one in France was 1666. So the sixes
Apparently,
Yeah.
Mention.
Yeah.
It was just similar in numbers, that made it easy to remember. So I was thinking, those who say, get rid of the police or defund the police so they don't exist. No, we human beings are too broken to.
Yeah.
And I'm
I
afraid.
think we just set that phrase aside. We just don't even, we
Yeah.
just say,
Yeah,
no.
forget it. Right.
Yeah,
Reimagine.
not talking about that, not talking.
Right.
Reimagine is the thing.
Right,
I would
right,
Rethinking how we do it. That's
right,
thinking
right.
about. Yeah.
Well, here's Chuck.
Hey, another face.
Yeah, he's driving.
Like he's in the car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am. I have to apologize again. We're coming from Philly to another birthday party.
Oh.
Well, we are just wrapping up. One of the things that we should talk about, two of the things that we should talk about, one is how often do we want to get together? And we've talked about having a focus on criminal justice reform, and so the question is, how would we go about it? Are there articles or books that we want to read and discuss? Are there things happening in other states and cities that we would like to consider in terms of actions that we would support? We clearly have a range of perspectives that we can share in having all of these conversations. And so we don't have time to go through all of that. I would make a proposal that we nominally get together twice a month.
Okay.
I don't know if that's every 2 weeks. If we said every 2 weeks, the next one is Father's Day. So I don't know if that's a non-starter in terms of. I'm sorry?
I think that would.
I'm likely to be out of town.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially this summer, there's a lot of people going and coming.
Probably, yeah.
Well, do you want to wait till the fall? I mean, that seems sort of, we can do that. We can just say we're not going to do anything until the fall. We are going to have another person added to our group as a result of the work that David Andrews and I did earlier this week. And we certainly could do it where we would say, well, we'll pick a Sunday that we think will work for everybody. And if it turns out that somebody can't make it,
You just can't make it, yeah.
it'll happen from time to time.
So I would suggest maybe once a month until September, when things start going back.
Okay.
To hopefully some kind of normal, quote unquote.
Okay.
So I think we should meet in July and August, once Sunday.
Okay.
Just to keep in touch with
Just keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's
First Sunday of July is the 4th.
Yeah, it wouldn't be that one.
It wouldn't be that one.
And I have one what is not quite an announcement. It's an appeal for some work. I sent a letter to all Presbyterian churches in the city of Wilmington and to Sam's and to Trinity, to churches that I knew and knew me. So the leaders, the pastors at least knew who I was. And it's a follow-up from a member of Mother Africa Methodist Church. And her name is Margaret Collins. And she has this brainstorm, if you want, or this idea. I think she's checked out with some others, and she's the founder of Last Stop to Freedom. And very quickly, Last Stop to Freedom is the name that was given to Wilmington, Delaware, in the days when the enslaved Harriet, you heard about that, Harriet Tubman?
Yes.
Right? Oh, indeed.
The next stop was Marcus Hook, which was a free state until the fugitive slave laws. But nonetheless, she's the founder, and I sent out this information at her request to get white folk, white members of white, predominantly white churches, for the church to do basically two things. three things: sign on to her principles, which was a document attached, and sign on to that. The minister agreed to preach on the last Sunday of the month for 4 months leading up to August, last Sunday of August, May, June, July, August. All right.
Quarterly.
First of May. All right. And then for the white members to write about their experience with the race issue. What have you experienced? What are your thoughts about what you've experienced? Just talk about and put on paper and send it to Margaret Collins. Now, all of that was sent to the pastors and the clerk session in Presbyterian world, because I know that world. And in the case of the 2 Episcopal churches and 1 Lutheran and 1 Unitarian church, it only went to the pastors because those are the only people I knew. But in the invitation and is a message, spread the word. Get as many white churches as we can involved in this summer and see what it has. Now, we're already in June.
Mhm.
So that if we aim for August quarterly, which is the 4th Sunday of August,
Right.
we're running out of time. Now Margaret might decide to postpone it and wait till, do it later. But that's the intent. And in talking with her last week, she said, well, let's expand it a little bit. And so I'm going to be this week, I hope to have time to do it. I'm going to send it to all the churches in Newcastle County, the Presbyterian churches. And again, the invitation, hey, friends, brothers and sisters, reach out and let's see what this would produce. And I ran it past my daughter in Wisconsin, and she said, Dad, I think your issue is still COVID. I think your people are still emotionally, psychologically recovering from the lack of interaction, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how right she is about that. But to me, it's a fairly simple, not a lot of demand. And so since I'm talking to members of the churches to whom I sent the material, there you go. That's in the
When did you send it, Lyle?
early May. Like the first
Seriously?
week. Yeah, I sent the 4th of May or something like that.
Oh,
Wow.
Okay.
I'm surprised.
I'm surprised too.
Because I read everything they send.
I figured it would take a few weeks to, for decisions. All of us Protestant churches, we don't make decisions very fast. Pastors talk to people, talk to their leadership, and then decide, do we want to do this? Okay, so that's where it is.
I'm surprised I haven't heard about it. I'll say that frankly. I mean, Lynn and Mike Ganade and I chair the Peace and Justice Work Group at Westminster. That would be a group that would be,
Open to this. That's what I immediately thought of you. I expected
but
to have
haven't heard anything about it. Haven't heard a word.
Well,
I'm
maybe I need,
surprised.
right. And
I'll check with Greg.
yeah, and there's not been anything out of Hanover either. And First and Central knows about it but we don't have pastoral leadership at the moment.
Right.
And I plan to talk to some more folks there. And then, like Trinity and Limestone, everybody with a Wilmington zip code got my email.
Okay.
So,
I will check on that.
and Calvary and a bunch of others.
And if it's an email and people get so many emails,
I know
it's easy to miss that. Maybe phone calls.
Yeah, I'm planning to do
a phone
some.
call, like check your email, I send it to you, or send it again.
Right,
with a
that's what
phone call.
that's what yeah. So
Lyle, could you send me?
Could I make a suggestion?
What's that? Would you
Yeah,
like?
I was wondering.
Sue, would you like it?
I would.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
Go ahead, Chuck.
I have a suggestion. I find that I need to read something to become more knowledgeable about this, and just talking about it without some background makes it difficult for me. And I was wondering if there could be a reading list about the justice issue that would help group at SAM about racism, and that's really helpful for me to get a lot of different perspectives from a number of different books. And I find that I can connect more if I'm thinking about it with more breadth of information.
Mhm. I can see that.
So just do you have a reading list that would be helpful?
Are you talking specifically about the criminal justice issue or race and racism in more generally?
Well, the criminal justice system particularly,
Okay.
I think we all should read the book White Too Long, which if you haven't read it was very eye-opening about how the Christian church has tended to make racism and prejudice a significant part of their force over the years.
Yeah.
Right.
Who wrote that book, Chuck?
Come on. I will send it to you, Ernestine.
Okay, well, don't feel bad because I read books and sometimes can't remember who the author is, so that's okay.
But it was extremely powerful, written by a Southern ex-Baptist who grew up in a Baptist congregational. His father was a Baptist minister, and his position made it extremely strong, and I really was moved by it.
Okay.
I could send you a few books and then others in the group could add to it. Two of the ones that I would certainly recommend is Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and also Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson is a very readable, very powerful book on the subject. So those are the two just off the top of my head, but there are others as well.
And they made a movie on Just Mercy.
Yes, they did.
Find that.
Just Mercy, the book, deals with a range of things in the criminal justice system, including how we treat juveniles,
Yes.
which is a terrible issue. The movie didn't cover the juvenile piece of it. It dealt with people on death row who are innocent. And it was a powerful movie, but the book is excellent and has a broader view of criminal justice issues. But if you haven't seen the movie, I would suggest that you get some popcorn and watch it. It's quite something.
What's it on Netflix or something like that?
It could be now, most likely.
I'm sure it's available now. It's been out for the better part of a year, so I'm sure it's readily available. But if you haven't seen it, I really, it's excellent.
The
Okay.
book really does deal with the adolescent and
Yes.
the criminal justice system around adolescence, and that really should be read to get that perspective.
And
What was the movie again? What was the movie?
Just Mercy. Just Mercy.
Just Mercy.
Yep. And the Supreme Court just issued another horrific decision, in essence saying it was still okay to sentence juveniles to life in prison without possibility of parole.
And they don't have brain development.
No, they don't.
No, they don't, and that's another thing with the police. I mean, they're so young. If they take them at 18 and start trying to train them in these things, their brains are really still not ready.
Right.
You know, so anyway, that's
Right. Okay. Well, I'll send an email. I'll send a couple.
Okay.
I'll send one about our next meeting and some of the rest of that. And then I'll send one with some resources. And then all of you feel free to forward that along with anything that you want to add that you think would be helpful, because there's some really good reading materials out there that I think will help inform our conversations.
Will we meet the second Sunday in July?
I hope so. I'm thinking the second Sunday in July would be a nominal date past the holiday weekend. Is that?
uh-huh.
I think that's the 11th.
possible?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's pencil that in and I'll include that in the email. In the meantime, enjoy summer. Safe travels, Chuck.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm missed again. I was thinking maybe this is some subconscious resistance on
Oh,
my
I
part.
hope not. I hope not.
Well, you've got
What?
good excuse there. You're running around to birthday parties, you know.
Well,
Well,
and Chuck,
I was in the traffic jam in Philly on our way back, and then I was afraid to try to talk and drive at the same time.
I
Right.
understand that. I was in that traffic jam Friday night when they were paving. Oh my God, it was terrible. But Chuck, it gave us a chance to talk about you.
Yes.
Good. I'm glad.
All
You're
right, listen,
important.
Terry, good luck with your physical therapy. I hope you
Yeah.
continue to recover well.
Yeah.
And we'll see you in second Sunday in July, God
Okay.
willing.
God bless all of you.
Thank you
Bye
again.
bye.
Take
Bye bye,
care.
Christine. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.